Title: The Heartbreaking Truth, When Love Isn't Enough to Heal Betrayal. Before we dive into today's story, I need to ask you a favor: don't skip this part. I promise you, what we're about to discuss is something that could change the way you think about relationships, trust, and forgiveness. If you stick around to the end, I'll share the lessons I've learned from this powerful story and how it applies to our lives, whether or not we've gone through something similar. So get comfortable, grab a snack, and let's talk about betrayal and the hard truth of what happens after it. It's amazing how quickly life can change, isn't it? One moment, everything seems normal, maybe even better than ever, and then, in the blink of an eye, it all comes crashing down. That's exactly what happened to this woman. She thought everything was going well. Sure, their relationship had its ups and downs, but they were working through things. She'd made some mistakes in the past, like having an affair. She knew that the damage was done, but they'd been fighting for reconciliation. They had moments of real connection, and she believed they were slowly rebuilding. Then, one weekend, her world turned upside down. Her husband, whom she had hurt so deeply, made the decision to end their marriage. The bombshell dropped. He told her he wanted a divorce. The betrayal of her affair, while painful enough, had been compounded by the emotional trauma of the years that followed. And this time, there was no turning back. You see, in early 2021, she had an affair. It wasn't just a slip-up, it lasted for 2 months. It was with a co-worker, someone who was there, someone who seemed to understand her when she felt neglected. The betrayal cut deep for her husband. When he found out, it was like the world crumbled around him. He confronted her and she confessed. It was raw, it was painful, and it was the beginning of a long, difficult journey to try and fix what had been broken. At first, the husband went into denial. He didn't want to face the truth, but he couldn't ignore it. After confronting her, he went into full recovery mode, no contact with her coworker, quitting his job, going into therapy. And the first year was brutal. But still they tried. He resisted therapy for a long time, but finally he saw the value in it. They began the long process of healing. Their relationship was not perfect by any means, but there were signs of improvement. Yet, despite the progress, the scars remained. Now, this is where I want to pause for a moment and reflect on something I've noticed from similar stories. The first year of healing in a relationship after infidelity is, without a doubt, the hardest. Everyone talks about getting over it, but the reality is far from that. The emotional toll is often so intense that both partners feel like they're walking through a fog, unable to see the way forward clearly. In this case, the husband was physically unable to touch his wife for over a year. Imagine that, the intimacy they once shared was gone. It wasn't just about sex, it was about the deeper emotional connection they'd once had. That's what betrayal can do to people. It shatters trust on a level that's hard to rebuild, and sometimes, the person who was hurt can't even find the strength to touch the one who betrayed them. But, the wife, despite knowing that she had caused this pain, stayed committed. She worked on herself, went to therapy, and tried to be the partner her husband needed. They had moments where they thought they were truly healing. And isn't that the hope we all cling to when we've hurt someone we love? We hope that if we work hard enough, if we try enough, they'll forgive us and we can go back to where we were. But here's the thing, the damage caused by betrayal doesn't always heal in the way we want it to. Then came the moment when the husband hit his breaking point. They were sitting at the table, having what she thought was going to be a peaceful, intimate evening together. He had asked her to prepare a nice dinner, and she thought they were finally going to reconnect. She was so wrong. In a heartbreaking turn, her husband told her he wanted a divorce. He said that he loved her, but the damage was simply too great. In that moment, she was blindsided. For all the progress they'd made, for all the effort she had put into repairing the relationship, it wasn't enough. He had reached a place where he couldn't continue. The betrayal had left its permanent mark. I think this is where the story really hits home for many of us. How many times in life do we put our heart and soul into something, only to realize that it wasn't enough to make things right? It's a painful, humbling experience. And if you've ever been in a situation where your best efforts didn't work out, I know exactly how crushing that can feel. But here's the lesson we can take away from this part of the story: sometimes love just isn't enough. There's a big difference between loving someone and earning back their trust. We may feel genuine remorse, we may apologize over and over, but at the end of the day, we can't control how the other person feels. And sometimes, no matter how much we wish things could go back to how they were, we have to accept that they never will. Before we get into the next part of the story, let me know your thoughts so far. It's tough to talk about, but I think we all have moments in our lives where we've faced betrayal or made mistakes that we wish we could undo. Stick around, because the story only gets deeper and the lessons are crucial. After the divorce announcement, the woman was left reeling. She didn't understand how everything could fall apart so quickly. She had worked so hard to make things right, but now, it felt like she was losing everything. The husband, though still emotionally attached to her, had made the decision to move on for good. He moved out and started searching for a new place. He told her that they should split custody of their kids 50-50. The reality of what was happening began to sink in. But what struck me was the way she described her feelings. She said she felt like she was losing not just her husband, but her sense of self. She had become so wrapped up in the guilt of what she had done that she had forgotten about the other people in her life, the people she had to be strong for, like her children. In the midst of this emotional storm, she forgot to pick up her kids from school. She was so exhausted from crying and trying to process everything that she couldn't keep up with basic responsibilities. And this, my friends, is where we get another tough lesson. When we don't take care of ourselves, we fail those around us. She was so consumed by her own grief that she couldn't show up for her kids. And that's one of the harshest realities of emotional fallout. When we don't prioritize our own healing, it impacts everyone around us. I remember a time in my own life when I was overwhelmed with personal struggles. I wasn't going through infidelity, but I was in a tough place emotionally. I neglected the things that mattered most: my health, my relationships, and even my work. I let the weight of my own despair drag me down, and it took a toll on everything around me. I wasn't the partner, friend, or family member that I needed to be. What I learned through that experience is that healing isn't just about focusing on the problem at hand. It's about taking care of yourself so you can be there for others. When we fall into despair, we often forget that self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary. As the days passed, the woman's reality set in. She was no longer just facing the loss of her husband, she was facing the complete breakdown of her life as she knew it. The weight of her actions, the consequences of the affair, were no longer something she could deny. She had lost her husband's trust. She had failed as a partner, and now she was failing as a parent. The emotional fallout was so heavy that it seemed insurmountable. At this point in the story, there is no turning back. She can't undo the past, and neither can he. They're both left to pick up the pieces of their lives and move forward separately. This is the painful reality of betrayal and broken trust. Sometimes, no matter how hard we try to make things right, the damage is irreversible. So, what lessons can we take away from all of this? The most important one, I think, is this: when trust is broken, it's hard to rebuild. Relationships take time, effort, and mutual understanding. But sometimes love alone isn't enough to overcome betrayal. And that's okay. The second lesson is about taking responsibility for our actions. No matter what situation we're in, we have to own up to the consequences of our decisions. Sometimes, those consequences are harder to deal with than we anticipate. And finally, we learn that healing is a long, difficult road. It's not a quick fix. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to face the hard truths about ourselves. Thanks for joining me today. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a tough decision about a relationship? Let's talk about it. Remember, no matter where you are in life, there's always room for growth. Life isn't perfect, but the lessons we learn along the way can shape us into better versions of ourselves. If you've learned something from today's video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, stay strong and keep growing. The lessons we learn from life are the ones that truly matter. See you next time.